I could be giving birth right now. I recorded this episode a few weeks ago, and I'm actually due to have another baby on the 15th of December, today, the same day as this full moon. And so I want to share with you some thoughts and some plans that support us in this really powerful, precious, and dare I say it, even sacred moment. Not just the birth, but primarily the postpartum period, the 4th trimester. Hello, and welcome to Sacred Herbalism, the full moon segment of the Elder Tree podcast, where we explore how plants can support us to enter into a sacred relationship with life and the living world. I'm Stephanie Hazel, and I've recorded this episode beneath the gaze of epic Wollumbin, where I live in Bundjalung country, and I pay my respects to the First Nations people of this land, as well as to the spirits and plants of this ancient earth. If you love what we do, you can support the Elder Tree mission of putting medicine in the hands of the people by joining our Patreon, where you can access special teachings from our presenters and our interviewees. So, let's walk into the moonlit forest together. Are you ready? Now, we all know that a due date is quite an invented thing, and really my baby is due anytime in December. So I might already be in that postpartum baby bubble. I might be in labour right now, or I might be waddling around like an uncomfortable whale, hot in the middle of summer. But anyway, in this moment, I'm thinking a lot about postpartum, what it means to be in that window of recovery and bonding and deep transformation, not only for me, but for the new child, for my whole family. And I want to share some of those thoughts with you today. We'll talk about why this window is so important to take seriously. I'm going to look at a bunch of other cultural practices from around the world, different places, and how they approach this time, the traditions that exist, and even the rules that exist for new mothers. And then I will share some of my most important plants and allies for that period of time. The herbs come towards the end of the episode, so if you are really curious, my top 3 herbal medicines, plant allies for the postpartum period, are absolutely motherwort, an incredible plant for helping the psychological, emotional landscape of hormonal transition, helping us find inner ground, calm, stability, and resourcefulness in our hearts and our wombs. Nettle, the supreme nourisher, nourishing our bodies, supporting us to thrive and be well after the arduous task of building a baby and keeping our milk supply really up as well. And thirdly, raspberry leaf or lady's mantle, 2 powerful herbs for supporting uterine return, for healing and astringing the tissues. But more on herbs is coming later. So how does this topic fit into sacred herbalism? I mean, it is just relevant to what's happening in my life right now, and I want to share that with you. But there is a beautiful connection here. You know, if sacred herbalism is about reverence, presence, and collaborating with plants in intentional ways to support a flourishing in humans, but also a flourishing beyond that, then this really does apply. Postpartum is a time that really requires that kind of dedication, that kind of reverence and presence, and it's a liminal space. If you've had a baby or been involved in caring for a tiny newborn, you will know it's a liminal space. That child has just traversed the portal between life and death is close. Spirit is close. There is a wonder and a magic and a mystery and an overwhelm to that process. Being awake at all hours of the night and day, having little naps on and off, the brain is really in an altered state of consciousness. Our culture has a tendency to move towards distraction, achievement, materialism, a real desanctification, a stripping of the sacred out of life, out of all areas of life, even childbirth, right? One of the most mystical things, even death. We're not talking about death today, we're talking about birth. And they are closer than we might like, right? Women have died and babies have died and do die in childbirth, since time immemorial. It's not guaranteed, right? And so it's likely that if you're listening to this, I have a living child in my arms or will have soon, but it's not guaranteed, right? And some of that mystery and unknowable nature is part of what makes it so powerful and strips away some of the thought, some of the achievement orientation. It's so common to see stories and posts and videos from people encouraging mothers to essentially bounce back really quickly, to get back in the gym, to get their baby body back, to get back into activity, back to work. And that's almost like a badge of achievement. Probably if you listen to this podcast, you have a slightly different cultural leaning, that this is probably not news to you, but it's worth looking at, right? What does it say about our culture that it's an achievement for a woman to look like she didn't just grow a whole person inside her and then virtually, open her body in two to let this person into the world? Why is it an achievement to delete that, to delete the intensity of that? And the reality is that birth and pregnancy are really big for a woman's body. And so we have all these powerful invitations in postpartum period to bond and connect and be in the liminal and be in the sacredness of this new person arriving in the world. I mean, what greater mystery and miracle is there, right? But it's also so important to take this time seriously, just from a medical perspective, a physical health medical perspective. There is a doctor called Dr. Oscar Serelak who was in Nimbin for a long time, and I think he's now in Byron, I'm pretty sure, and he's written a book called The Postnatal Depletion Cure. His whole book, it's quite an interesting read, it's not a very long book, and his work is entirely around women who have become not necessarily postpartum depressed, but that could be part of it, but postpartum depleted. He talks about the impact of not getting proper nutrition during pregnancy and postpartum, being things like fertility, menstruation, menopausal difficulties. And actually that's something you see a lot in some of the old writings about postpartum, and even in different cultures it's considered that if you don't do postpartum well, then menopause will be hard, because we're depleting all of these reserves that we need to rebuild in order to make this transition into a different hormonal landscape easeful and healthful, right? And especially if you're having children later in life, actually menopause is not so far away. But even if you're having children at 25, some of the other Asian traditions speak about the better you do your postpartum, the better you recover from birth, then the better and more joyful menopause will be. Osteoporosis is an issue. Ongoing weakness of the abdominals. We're talking about, the kangaroo pouch belly, incontinence. It's really common. So many women are partially or fully incontinent after having multiple children, especially. Thyroid disorders. I have a couple of friends who are on thyroid medication, 3-6 months after giving birth. Mental dysfunction, right? Baby brain, the mind not working well, ongoing fatigue, memory loss, and it's really serious. If you have serious brain fog, it's really hard to show up in life in a way that feels satisfying and joyful. Insomnia. How many women do you know whose children start sleeping through the night, but they're still waking up all night not sleeping, right? Chronic inflammation and inflammatory conditions, and postnatal depression. It's estimated that 20% of women in Australia become clinically depressed after the birth of a child and end up on antidepressants. 20%, that's huge, right? And so these conditions can last for years, or they can surface later on, especially around menopause, when we're drawing on some of those same reserves that we are during pregnancy, childbirth, and postnatal. So some really, really big reasons to take it seriously. And something that I really love that Dr. Oscar Serelak says, he says that it's never too late to do postpartum care. You know, if you listen to this and you're like, oh my God, I was one of those women who had no support. I was doing it all alone with older children, parenting full time. And, you know, my partner was working full time and I was doing everything and I was trying to exercise and I was trying to be a superwoman. I really didn't get that period of rest and sanctity that I needed. Then maybe it's worth thinking about how you create that for yourself now. What would that look like? The postpartum period is also called quite often the 4th trimester. And this shows us that actually there's a whole 3 months of integration that's still part of the child building, the human making process. You know, in this way you can think of pregnancy being a full year, a full 4 seasons. The first trimester being that, you know, often quite nauseous and exhausted phase, and then the high of the second trimester where there's all this energy to make things happen and do things and get out there for, you know, that moment while you can. Then the third trimester, the often quite uncomfortable and exhausting time of being heavily pregnant. And then the postpartum period, the 4th trimester, isolating from the world. So here is some inspiration from different places. I've gotten this from a really beautiful book called The First 40 Days by Chinese-American author Heng Wu. And she talks about how when she had her first child, her mum and her aunties, you know, bustled in, took over the kitchen, and at first she was quite resentful about this, but then as the days went on, she realised what an incredible gift it was, that they essentially forced her to lay in bed for a month. And then seeing how her other friends, more westernised friends, have not recovered from birth as well as she has, she's actually become inspired to make this her whole career. The First 40 Days, The Essential Art of Nourishing the New Mother. And so these are traditions I've taken from that book. So Heng comes from the Chinese tradition. I think her aunt is a Chinese medicine practitioner, and there they call it Zuo Yue Zi, which means sitting out the month. And in that month, women in China are cared for by female relatives. They are not allowed to cook, clean, exercise, or go outside for a full month, right? No exercise, no cooking. It means no laundry, right? A full month. And in that time, they're fed food that's essentially convalescent food. So warming herbal teas, soups, porridges, congees, the kind of food that's appropriate to eat when you've had a really bad flu and you're just recovering, or you've had serious surgery. Collagen-rich foods are really important. So in Chinese culture, pig's trotters and chicken feet, these really rich collagen sources that are fed to new mothers. And unsurprisingly, if you know anything about Chinese medicine, they're really not into cold or raw foods or drinks during this time. Totally prohibited, as is washing your hair because it's considered to be too cold. Now, I have very fine Western hair that dries very quickly, and I live in a warm climate, so that's not something that I'll be following. But if you have really thick Asian hair or really thick whatever kind of racial hair, and you live somewhere cold, you might want to be aware of the fact that you want to keep that warmth in your body. So in this Chinese Zuo Yue Zi tradition, the mother is encouraged to do pretty much nothing other than bond with her newborn and heal from the task of labor, which is, you know, basically like joyfully, powerfully, and spiritually being hit by a bus after running a marathon. That's how I feel about it, and we downplay it, right? We want to emphasize how powerful women are, and we are. It's an incredible thing to be able to do, but we can't delete the immensity of the toll that takes on a woman's body. And you also need to re-nourish in that period. If you think of all of, you've just grown a person, all of the nutrients, the minerals, the calcium, the, DHA, all these things that we're pouring into this child, humans are one of the only animals where the placenta will take what it needs regardless of what it's doing to the mother's body, right? And so if you don't have the right things in your diet, or if you're not actually absorbing them well enough because of gut health, then you will be taking it out of your own brain cells, out of your own bones, out of your own tissues to give this child the best chance of thriving that it can have, which of course is what we want. So re-nourishing in that time is so important. So in China, the mother basically lies in bed for a month with her baby, breastfeeding, sleeping, resting, and being fed. In Latin America, we have the cuarentena, the 40 days. And again, female relatives come and stay and will do all of the domestic duties. So again, we have 40 days where a mother is basically forced to do nothing. No cooking, no cleaning. There's a particular slow-cooked chicken soup that women get fed daily, and they're not allowed any spicy or greasy foods, which, you know, if you're in Mexico, is quite a feat, right? And then there's the wrapping of the belly in a special cloth to keep the belly warm, but also to support the return of the uterus to the right place and give a bit of extra protection to those abdominal muscles. Indonesia is a place where there's a really beautiful tradition of mother-centered, midwife-led birthing care. And in Indonesia, a midwife will visit every day to massage the mother for a month. Imagine that. A massage every day for a month. I just wish that was my reality. I'm sure I'll get a few massages later on. But so the midwife visits daily to massage the mother and bathe her in therapeutic herbal baths. She gets fed jamu, which is made from egg yolks, palm sugar, tamarind, turmeric, and other healing herbs. And again, that belly wrapping every day to support the return of the uterus. In Korea, the postpartum period is called samchili. And this is at least 21 days, but up to 30. And the main idea is that mother must stay warm, snug, and well fed. And there's a particular seaweed soup with beef that they have to eat every day, and all icy and cold foods are banned, right? Now, something I quite like in Korea is that the baby is not introduced to anyone other than that immediate home family baby bubble until they're 100 days old. That's 3 full months. And I think a big reason for that is health. You know, when a newborn comes into the world, just working out how to digest and breathe is a full-time job for their little bodies. So if they're also catching colds or coughs or other things like that, then that can be really dangerous and just very difficult for a little person in those first 3 months. This is quite different, where we're almost expected to receive our family members and friends, you know, in the first couple of weeks, right? This is 3 whole months where no one sees that baby. The baby doesn't leave the house. So there's some real commonalities here of like nourishing, easy to digest tonic foods, mainly soups, porridges, you know, herbal teas, etc. Being really pampered, not allowed to work. Like, this is really, you're not doing chores, right? Like, how long are we able to in our culture give mothers permission to not do chores, that someone else should do them? And it's beautiful to arrange like a food drop that makes things a lot easier. But what if we actually had a culture, imagine if we had it on Medicare, where you actually had someone come and live with you for at least those first 3 weeks and do the laundry, etc. Now I'd love to get into some more of the nitty-gritty strategies, herbs, foods to support the 4 principles of postpartum care. I think of these as rest, nourishment, healing, and soothing. So with those 4 areas, I'm going to talk about some specific favorite herbs for them. And there are many, many herbs we could be using, but motherwort, nettle, raspberry leaf, these are really important herbs in the postpartum portal time. I think we've spoken about rest a lot already, you know, the importance of the mother just doing as little as possible, really allowing her body to come back into shape. My osteo that I was seeing in Melbourne when Ariane was born, she does a lot of work with perinatal women, and she said that you can actually tell for 18 months after a woman has had a baby on an x-ray, you can see that that's happened in that time, because it takes 18 months for the skeleton alone to return to a non-perinatal state, right? 18 months for your skeleton to look the same as it did before you got pregnant. And so even we need to be thinking about how we exercise and how we move and how we look after ourselves for that long of a period, right? So resting is so important. And then soothing. What I mean by soothing, a mother's nervous system is so influential on a child's nervous system. That's what a lot of the co-sleeping philosophy comes from, that babies co-regulate. So even lying on a mother, on a father, on a grandmother, skin to skin, the child's breathing rate, heart rate, blood pressure will all be much more normal and much more in a healthier range than if they're on their own, on the couch or on a crib, etc. So that co-regulation is so important. So whatever psychological and emotional experience the mother is having will impact that child. And so for the sake of the child and for the sake of the future of the species, right, of how well adjusted we are as a species moving forward into these crazy times, we need the mother to feel supported, held, loved, and calm. For me to increase that kind of sacred aspect as well, we want the mother to feel like she's in a really special time, that she has the permission and the support to be fully present, to show up for it. There are some beautiful herbs to support us with our rest in this time. And by rest, we mean, taking stress out of the system, supporting an easeful, joyful relaxation, right? It's not just about not doing things, it's about feeling at peace in our hearts. And motherwort, as I've said at the beginning of this episode, is just the most beautiful herb for this. Any herbally oriented midwife, doula, postpartum carer will have motherwort in their birth kit. It has been used this way for thousands of years in the European tradition. There's also a Japanese motherwort and a Siberian motherwort, and it has some similar uses throughout a really big part of the planet. Motherwort gives us an internal ground of ease. It softens the body, it softens the womb in preparation for labor, and it softens the psyche. It helps us to become good mothers. Even Culpeper said that motherwort makes good and happy mothers of children, right? So we've seen this in this plant, and drinking motherwort tea daily, especially in the first 2 or 3 weeks, especially on day 3, when there's a huge hormonal come down from the pregnancy and the birth. The milk is coming in and the prolactin levels are rising. It's a huge transition that happens, and many women feel really distressed, really teary, really emotional, and motherwort is the primary herb to support this time and any kind of postnatal anxiety or depression that might be arising. Even if it's mild or severe, motherwort will help here. On a spirit level, motherwort's property is harmonizing the relationship between the heart and the womb. So you can see how this is perfect for the postpartum period. And in fact, in my mind, motherwort is almost a specific herb for supporting the psyche, the heart during hormonal transitions, menopause, postpartum, menarche, etc. You can take motherwort as a tincture or a tea. I would be taking drop doses of tincture, about 5 drops to 3 drops a few times a day, or a couple of cups of motherwort tea daily. Lemon balm is also a favourite herb in this area for me. I love lemon balm. I call her the bringer of cool, calm joy, because she's a calming herb and a cooling herb. Like motherwort, they're both cooling, but lemon balm is very uplifting to the heart. It makes the heart merry, as Culpeper said. And it's really lovely for the baby to get some of the lemon balm to help them with their digestion, with bloating. You know, it's a big deal, the digestion coming on online. All of a sudden receiving nutrients through the mouth, not the umbilical cord, having to break it all down, right? And that lemon balm can help soothe upset little tummies, and also our own tummies, and just bring that sense of lightness and joy. So motherwort lemon balm tea are beautiful ones to drink freely, especially if someone's feeling like they're getting a bit of postnatal depression or anxiety. It's also quite common. I realized I was having these moments of postnatal anxiety around 3 a.m. I'd do a really big feed of my daughter at about 2. She was a fairly good sleeper as a newborn, as in she would do 4-hour chunks, so she'd wake up and have a big feed and then go back to sleep. And I would get really cold after that feed. Like I felt like I had ice in my back and I'd almost need a heat pack behind my breast, the upper back there, to fall asleep. And I'd start to just wig out about, oh, she did this thing, maybe she's really sick. You know, her health and well-being would be this source of incredible anxiety for me. And that's partly due to the fact that we produce a lot of prolactin in those early hours. So we produce a lot of breast milk. And prolactin and dopamine have an inverse relationship. So when the milk drops, so too does our dopamine. This kind of makes sense, right? Like dopamine is our molecule of satisfaction and motivation and get things done in many ways. And when you're breastfeeding, it's quite good not to have that sense of drive and motivation to do things because you just need to sit there. But for some people, it can unsettle the hormonal landscape, the neurological landscape. And it was only months later I looked back and said, oh, I was actually having anxiety, like actual anxiety in those early hours. So it would have been really good if someone in that time, you know, later on, if it had been, could have been me, but in that postpartum period, you know, someone making a beautiful motherwort lemon balm chamomile tea with honey in a thermos and leaving it by the bed so that when I was breastfeeding Ariane at that time, I could have been drinking that tea and give that support to myself, you know, give that support to my hormonal inner world. Because of course then if I'm lying there in bed really stressed and anxious, then that's going to be affecting my child. Other than herbs, the most important thing here is just to stay cocooned away from the world with no visitors and as little stimulation as possible. So be really aware, you know, isolate yourself, not just from people, but also from social media, from your phone, from Netflix. Like, give yourself the gift of just disconnecting for at least 3 weeks. And it's hard because everyone wants to know how you're doing, how's the baby going. So with my eldest daughter, Ariana, I actually gave my phone to my mother, who was living there with us, to help with the postpartum period. And I said to her, here's the code, please answer messages on my behalf, send little updates. I don't want to look at it. Because once you start looking at it, they're very cleverly designed and they hook us in. So just not having it at all, I had this beautiful process of rest from the stimulation of my screen. I didn't go onto social media once. I didn't end up in long conversations with friends. I was just in my room, in the garden, with my child, really in that delicate space. There's a reason that in some places people have up to 100 days of isolation. It's not just for the health of the child, it's also so the mother can come back to herself and just be really protected in this time when she's so open spiritually, emotionally, psychologically. When I was giving birth, I felt like my role, my job was to essentially go right up to the portal of life and death and open myself so wide so that I could reach through and pull my child's spirit through into the world of the living. I don't know if you relate to that, but it felt to me like I'd gone deep into the underworld, and it's slow. All the myths that speak about going to the underworld, you know, it's a slow return. Nothing is quite the same. Persephone is forever changed. The principle of rest and soothing are really connected, right? Like I've been using them a bit interchangeably here, almost like the rest is the physical aspect and the soothing is the psycho-emotional aspect. And these herbs that soothe our psyche allow us to take the rest that we need. Now, the other great soother of our psyche is beauty and the earth herself. I've spoken so much about animism and earth connection on this segment of the podcast. And don't forget that the earth is there to support us as well. You're not alone in the process of growing and birthing a child. So I really recommend getting out in nature when your body's up to it. So it might be a week, it might be 5 days, it might be 3 weeks, but especially if you have a beautiful garden or you have access to somewhere wild and gorgeous where you can lie on the grass on a blanket and watch the sky behind the leaves move in the wind, watch the bees, etc. This helps us to co-regulate with the body of the earth. Just like our baby co-regulates with our body, we also co-regulate with the body of the great mother, Gaia. There's heaps of science available to back up how down-regulating nature time is for our nervous system. All of these changes that happen even from looking at many shades of green together. Our nervous system down-regulates and relaxes. You already know this, right? You didn't need the science to tell you that being in nature is relaxing, that something in you settles. So when you can, have a moment by yourself. Just go and lie on the earth and let yourself be the child for a moment. Drink in the beauty. Ask your friends to bring you flowers along with meal drops. So you have beautiful bunches of flowers in your room that you're spending all this time in. And if you don't have access to wild nature, then bring lots of pot plants into the room and bring that atmosphere of soothing and calm. Nature sounds in your music, rain sounds, whatever it is that you need that will help you feel connected to that great mother as you transition into mothering this new person. Now, when we talk about nourishment, it's really the important one. It's so important to re-nourish our bodies after everything that's happened, after everything we've given in growing a child. The basic tenet of nourishment is basically to eat a variety of whole foods that are nutrient dense and that are prepared in the easiest way to digest as possible. It's not just about what we put in our mouths, but also how well we absorb. You are what you absorb, not just what you eat, right? So there's a reason that all of the traditional, lying in postpartum periods feed the mothers soups, teas, medicated milks, porridges, congees, broths, right? These are really, really easy to digest. This is especially important if you have a history of digestive weaknesses like bloating, gas, food sensitivities, or loose stools. If this is you, then being really aware not to eat anything that's upsetting your tummy and having the simplest to digest foods as possible. As wonderful as smoothies and salads and, fried dishes are and lasagna and all these things can be and how delicious they are, as wonderful as your favorite Uber Eats delivery is from your wherever, amazing food that you love to eat, often they're so complex with so many different ingredients and flavors and so much to break down that it can take a lot of chi to break these things down. And right now we need to be using as little chi as possible so we can rebuild our reserves. So really thinking about these simple to digest foods. I think eggs are amazing to eat, slow cooked meats, bone broth, seaweeds, they really look after your thyroid health, and high quality fats, so coconut oil, ghee if you're definitely tolerating dairy, avocado oil, flaxseed oil, fish oil, all of these DHA rich oils is really important. So something that terrified me a little bit when I was learning about all of this area is that the growing fetus's need for DHA, which is what we find in fish oil and is the basic building block of our brain cells, is so high that if you don't have enough in your bloodstream available to give to the baby, then the mother's body will actually dissolve her own brain cells to donate DHA to the child's brain. Right? Now, you can rebuild that later, but that's pretty scary, right? It's like, oh my God, I'm literally dissolving my brain. And I think a lot of mothers feel that. You know, having the science to back that up, you're like, yeah, that's what it felt like when I was pregnant and breastfeeding. Like my brain was dissolving and coming out my nipples. So making sure you have enough DHA in your diet matters. If you are not vegan, get yourself some good quality, cleanly sourced fish oil. Have as much of it as you can. Have more than they say. Also have lots of flax oil. If you're vegan, flax oil, chia seed, get as much of those into you. And I would really honestly recommend considering pregnancy and postpartum as a time to have a small amount of animal products as medicine. There are some amazing nourishers in the herb world as well, right? We had the soothers before, and for me the top nourishers, number one will be nettle. Nettle is such a powerful herb of the blood. It supports kidney health, kidneys, clean our blood and control the mineral balance of the body. And it also builds blood on so many levels. So Matthew Wood actually says that his big insight into nettle came about when he realized that nettle is not only really high in protein and minerals, but it actually contains an intelligence that teaches our body how to uptake and make use of the protein in our diet. And this is another way that it takes weight off the kidneys, because the kidneys have to process any unused protein every day from our system and excrete them as uric acid and nitrogen. So nettle helps us to actually build tissue, right? And it nourishes the blood. And blood is so important as a concept in pregnancy and postpartum. In Chinese medicine, they say women are ruled by blood and men are ruled by qi. Of course, both are necessary. But there is something in the mother's body in that time. You're just, our blood volume increases by 50% during pregnancy. So normally you have 8 liters of blood. Right now, where I am, right at the rounded end of pregnancy, I have 12 liters of blood, right? So making all that extra blood during the pregnancy is huge. And then in many ways, we are initiated into womanhood with blood. And our menstruation, we initiate into motherhood with blood. And blood is also, psychologically or symbolically so important. This child is a continuation of your bloodline, right? They are built of your blood. And there's a lot of bleeding that happens postpartum. So nettle helps to build the blood. It helps to promote healthy milk supply and also cleanse the blood. In Chinese medicine, 2 really popular blood tonic herbs postpartum is dangui or gudongquai, but do be careful with that one if you're still bleeding postpartum, because it can increase the flow of blood. It's a blood moving herb as well. It's better a little bit later on in that process. And Chinese red dates or jujubes, they are not actually dates, but they taste a bit date-like. They're delicious and they're used in porridges, in stewed fruit, or just as a snack. And they're considered to really build the blood and also support good sleep and calmness. Another herb I love postpartum is astragalus. So astragalus is a Chinese herb and it's considered to be a qi tonic. It's very nourishing and it helps us rebuild digestive capacity and immune capacity. So if your immune system and digestion was a bit, before getting pregnant even, then astragalus is probably a great herb. And it's one of the best herbs for raising the qi and preventing prolapse. A friend of mine, her sister, after her 3rd birth, was really suffering from uterine prolapse and looked like she was maybe even going to need surgery for that. And this particular friend is a Chinese medicine trained practitioner, and she started making quite large quantities of astragalus tea and getting her sister to drink it daily, multiple times a day, and within about 3 weeks the uterus had returned to place. So if you have a lot of hemorrhoids, if your uterus is really prolapsing, and especially if your digestive and immune function has never been great, then astragalus is a very safe, very gentle food-like herb, nourishing herb that you can take. And you can even put it in your bone broth. Astragalus, dongquai, goji berries, red dates. Traditionally in Chinese medicine, these would all be cooked up with soup bones into a kind of healing food as medicine broth. So we've talked about rest, soothing, and nourishment, and the final principle is healing. Obviously, rest and nourishment are foundational for good healing, but there's a lot of herbal support we can offer as well. So when we've given birth, either vaginally or with a cesarean section, there's often a lot of tissue damage, tissue stress, if you will. That's partly why we limit movement in that early part, so that the tissues can knit themselves back together. And there are some beautiful herbs here as well. Lady's mantle is a very beautiful looking plant that exudes little droplets of water, Alchemilla vulgaris, the little alchemist, and it's a really powerful restorer of vaginal tissue. It's an astringent herb that has an affinity for the womb, that tightens and restores vaginal and uterine tissues, reduces bleeding, and really helps the womb return to the right place. So I'm absolutely a fan of sitz baths postpartum. Whoever is looking after you, or if you're looking after a postpartum woman, my blend that I use is lady's mantle, raspberry leaf, calendula, and uva ursi. Uva ursi is a really beautiful disinfectant antimicrobial plant, antibiotic plant for the urogenital region. So it just helps with any tearing or any stitches, keeping them free from infection. And a sitz bath is really easy to use. Luckily, they'll already have a key piece of equipment. The baby bath is perfect just to sit your bottom in and let the teas and the herbs really penetrate that area. And all you do is you make a mix of those herbs, you take a big handful, you make a strong pot of herbal tea, let it sit for half an hour, and then pour that into a baby bath that's as hot as is comfortable with a good handful of salt. The salt helps in that early time to keep it hygienic and keep the tissues disinfected. And this it feels beautiful, and it helps heal the tissues with the calendula and support the return of the uterus with the lady's mantle and the raspberry leaf, and then keeps it infection free with the salt and the uva ursi. It's a beautiful way just to connect in with yourself. And you can just do it in a normal size bath, but you get a more concentrated dose of the plants onto those tissues like that. I haven't had much experience with vaginal steaming, but I think those herbs could also be really lovely doing vaginal steaming. And I also would make up that blend into a sauce bottle, like a squeezy bottle in the bathroom to use instead of toilet paper, to clean the vagina and the vulva and the anus after going to the toilet, so that you're not rubbing with paper and abrading, and you're just really getting those little micro doses of those herbs into that region. So I think that's enough for today. Thank you so much for sharing this moment as well with me, right? Like I'm about to enter into this process, or maybe I already have right about now. And so it feels really special to share, after 2 years of being on this podcast, share some of the thoughts and practices that I'll be using with you in this time. Feel free to send a little prayer of love my way for the birth, for the baby, for all to be well in this amazing time of transition. That's it for this moon cycle. Thanks for joining me in another layer of this fascinating conversation we are having about the role of the sacred in our lives as herbalists. If you know someone who would love this episode, then send it through to them, as our work strengthening our herbal community through grassroots herbal education starts right here. I'll see you next time the moon is round in the sky, and until then, I wish you good health and many plants.